Yo, what is going on, guys? It's your boy Fanatic, and I am here with the first ever Fanatics deep discussion. This is the episode 1 of this, not really a podcast, but just kind of a discussion in kind of a podcast format. It's not going to be any music, intro, or outro, or any editing, or anything like that. It's just going to be me talking about one big topic that I think cannot be answered in one 10 or 15 minute video. It might take up to an hour, might take an hour and a half, might take 30 minutes. It's going to be kind of between that 30 minute to hour ratio. So I figured might as well start it. So Fanatics Deep Discussions is what I'm calling the series, and it'll either be posted for the duration of summer on Sunday night or Monday morning, around midnight on every Sunday or Monday, depending on. It'll be uploaded, and whenever school runs around, it'll be just bumped back a day, either Saturday or Sunday. So today we are going to be diving in to try to figure out how many teams should be in the college football playoff. Right now we are at 4, and there's a lot of discussion that goes on between fellow college football fans that think maybe some people think 4 is exactly right. Some people want to go back to 2. Some people think 6 is the right amount. Some people think 8 is the right amount. Some people think 16 is the right amount. Some people even think 32 is the right amount. So there's just a lot of differing opinions on this. So I figured I'd go ahead and give you guys my opinion after a deep analysis over the past couple of years for the college football playoff. So I have my notes right here of all the playoff games that have happened over the past couple years. So let's just go ahead and dive into it. So I kind of want to start off, go subject by subject. So I do not think that going back to 2 teams is the right move. I think you need to give more teams a chance, and I think less teams, more controversy. So automatically you would think, well, 16 has to be the right one. I don't think so. Here's why. Because I don't want 4 lost teams that aren't worthy of being in the conversation, competing, and being in that conversation. I don't want a 4-loss team that gets in at number 16 competing with an undefeated number 1 team. That's just, it diminishes the value. It's almost like an elite club. You have these super high-end people, then you start letting in more average people, and then the lower tier people come in. Then the people that don't even belong in any club come in. It's just, it ruins the mystique and the rarity almost and the treasurability of that playoff. I don't know what treasurability means. I'm just rambling here. But let's go ahead and get started. I don't think 16 is the right move, and here's why. Again, it diminishes the value of having a spot. Value is the word I'm looking for. Because whenever you have a spot in that top 4 right now, the value is so heavy. You feel so precious whenever you get a top 4 spot. Even if you know you're going to get it, you still feel honored to have a top 4 spot. When you're in 16 teams, it doesn't really matter. You're like, yeah, we should be in here when there's 4 lost teams in here, so it doesn't matter as much. The committee doesn't matter. So going on to number 6 is the next topic I'm going to cover. So just to make sure, 16th is not the right number in my opinion. So moving on to number 6. 6 is a very, very interesting one. This is the only one where people would get bye weeks. We'd go, numbers 1 and 2 would get a bye week. 3 and 6 would face each other, and 4 and 5 would face each other. The winner of 3 and 6, if 3 beats 6, goes on to face the second seed team, and if 6 goes on to face the first seed team. We all know how it's done. And I don't think this is the right one. Here's why. People are begging for new teams to step up. That's why people loved it whenever Clemson dominated Alabama in the national championship, because people want to change. People want a different feel to it. And I don't think giving the great teams that always win bye weeks will help that. I think it'll just make it easier on them and make it more predictable. And more predictable is not good for everybody. Is not good for anybody. It's not good for the fans. It's only good for two people or 2 teams to be exactly sure. It's Clemson and Alabama. Those are the 2 teams that will always be number 1 and 2. And if they keep on getting bye weeks, it'll just keep on being Clemson and Bama in the national championship. And people don't want that. There's a reason Georgia and Bama was such a success. That's because Georgia was different. Georgia and Bama was a different matchup. We hadn't seen that 4 years in a row, you know? And it's just, I think, giving Alabama a bye week and even Clemson a bye week will just keep on making it more and more predictable, and that's not what you want. That's just not what you want at all. So 6, I think, is out of the question. So let's go ahead and take a dive in. All right, so the majority of this video is going to be projected on the 4 seed and the 8 seed. That's where I think the conversation comes in, and that's where we're really going to start taking a deep dive into my notes. So the first playoff, the top 4 seeds were this is back in 2014-15. It was Alabama, Oregon, Florida State, and Ohio State. Bama lost to Ohio State in an upset. Oregon beat Florida State. Ohio State beats Oregon to win the national title. Now, let's go into the position where there is 8 teams. Let's switch things up. We would add Baylor at number 5, TCU at number 6, Mississippi State at number 7, and Michigan State at number 8. I think Bama beats Michigan State, Oregon beats Mississippi State, and here's where the thing finally starts to change. TCU beats Florida State. Florida State got crushed by Oregon, and I think TCU would beat Florida State if that matchup was set up. And I think Ohio State beats Baylor. So, one of the big changes we have here is TCU is now in instead of Florida State, and that is a 25% difference. And that's a big difference. But let's keep on. I think... Oh, and actually, TCU would be the 4 seed and Ohio State would be the 3 seed. So I think Ohio State beats Oregon, and instead of that game in the national championship, it happens in the semifinal. And then Bama beats TCU. So instead of the semifinal being Ohio State and Bama, it's now in the national championship. And I think Ohio State beats Alabama in the national championship. So even whether it's 4 teams or 8 teams, the national champion stays the same. You're going to see that as a recurring theme throughout this deep dive discussion. So moving on to the 2015 and 2016 seasons. So the top 4 teams were Clemson, Bama, Michigan State, Oklahoma. Bama beats Michigan State, Clemson beats Oklahoma, Bama beats Clemson, Bama's national championships. Or Bama's the national champion. So let's add the 4 other teams. It would be Clemson versus Notre Dame, 1 versus 8. I think Clemson beats Notre Dame. Then it'd be Bama versus Ohio State, 2 versus 7. Bama beats Ohio State, stays the same. Then it would be Michigan State and Stanford. I think Stanford beats Michigan State. And then it'd be Oklahoma and Iowa, and I think Oklahoma beats Iowa. So just like in the previous year, it's a 25% difference. You will see that as a reoccurring theme throughout this video. So now it is Bama and Oklahoma. Bama beats Oklahoma. Clemson beats Stanford. Bama Clemson championship, just like it happened in real life. Bama beats Clemson to win the national title. So again, back-to-back years, the first 2 years, the national champion would have stayed the same with whether 4 or 8 people. But I don't think that's discouraging to an 18 playoff. Here's why. I think it's better because you are going to get the same champion. But, I'm going to save this to the end. I'm going to save my main point to the end. Let's move on to the next year. You have Bama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Washington. Clemson beats Ohio State. Bama beats Washington. Bama, Clemson meet in national championship. Clemson beats Bama. Now, let's add it to where there are the 4 other teams. Bama, Wisconsin, 1 versus 8. Bama beats them. Clemson beats Oklahoma. Ohio State and Michigan. Ohio State beats Michigan. Washington, Penn State. I think Penn State beats Washington off the momentum of being left out of the top 4. So again, a 25% difference. That's a big deal. It may not seem like a huge deal, and I mean the 18 playoff isn't going to change a ton, but it'll change a decent bit to definitely notice the difference. So I think Bama beats Penn State, Clemson beats Ohio State, Bama, Clemson meet in national championship. Clemson is the national champions once again. So again, the national champion stays the same. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I'll get to that point later on. Switching to the next page of my notes. So the 2017 championship. It was Clemson, Oklahoma, Georgia, Bama. Georgia beats Oklahoma. Bama beats Clemson. Bama beats Georgia to win the national championship. So now switching things up here, I think the top four stay the same. I think Clemson beats USC, Oklahoma beats Auburn, Georgia beats Wisconsin, Bama beats Ohio State. So I think this is the first year where the committee got the top four 100% correct. I think they hit the nail on the head. In the past 3 years, there's a recurring theme here. The 3 seed gets replaced in year 1. The 3 seed gets replaced in year 2. And the 4 seed gets replaced in year number 3. So it's always they get number 1 and number 2 right. And you know why? It's usually Bama and Clemson. It's always Bama. In first year it was Oregon. The other 2 years it was Clemson. So they're getting number 1 and number 2 right. But it's 3 and 4 that they struggle with. It's those teams that whenever you're in the argument, they seem to sometimes get the argument wrong. There's always an argument between 4 teams on who should go into 3, 4, 5, and 6. And at the start, they really struggled with that. They made a lot of mistakes, in my opinion. And I think they corrected a lot of those in the 2017 bracket. Yeah, so I think everything stays the same in the 2017 bracket, except there's more games. And, of course, Bama beats Georgia in the national championship. Bama's national champion. National champion stays the same once again. So, moving on to our latest season, the last season that we had. So it would be Bama-UCF, a very, very fun, interesting matchup. Bama beats UCF. Clemson beats Michigan. Notre Dame loses to Ohio State. Oklahoma beats Georgia, getting for vengeance for the year earlier. So again, a 25% percent difference as the number 3 team gets knocked out. That is 75% of the time when the bracket is not perfect, it's the 3 team that struggles. Again, I think they've gotten number 1 and number 2 right every single year, but it's number 3 especially, and also number 4, that they struggle with. That's when the real arguments come in for an 8-team playoff. Now, do I think that the 8-team playoff would fix the arguments? Absolutely not. The argument from 3 and 4 would switch to 7, 8, and 9 and 10. That's just how it is. People want to argue for their team, and they want to argue for their case. But here's why I think that an 8-team playoff could really benefit college football. It is because you get a lot of interesting matchups. You get just, obviously, coming from a football fan, I'm trying to come at this from a biased perspective, not just from a biased football fan. But more games is better for everybody. Yeah, you have to rent out more venues, but think about the tickets sold. Everybody makes more money. Everybody has more fun whenever there's more games. So what if the result's the same? You get to see more football games. What football fan would not want to see more football? There's no negative to this. And yeah, your spot may be a little less worthy, but it's precious. That spot is precious. It's a lot more precious than a 16-team playoff. I think number 8 is kind of the right situation. I think it's right in the middle of 16 and 4 and puts the best of both worlds together to make a perfect bracket. And no bracket will be perfect, but it's about as perfect as it gets, in my opinion. But think about the matchups that you would get that you wouldn't get earlier. In year number 1, Bama, Michigan State, I wouldn't mind seeing that. Ohio State, Baylor, who wouldn't want to see all those points being put up? That would be super exciting. Clemson, Notre Dame in year 2, that would be fun to see. Bama, Ohio State, yeah, that would be fun to see the vengeance from last year. Michigan State and Stanford, Stanford was very, very exciting that year. Who wouldn't want to see that? Oklahoma, Iowa, who wouldn't want to see Iowa try to prove their worth to a big powerhouse team like Oklahoma? The very next year, Bama, Wisconsin, those 2 powerhouse defenses, sign me up. Take my money. Here, I want tickets to that. Clemson, Oklahoma, obviously it'd be a great game. Ohio State, Michigan, who wouldn't want to see that incredible rivalry in their rematch? Except it's one of the biggest rivalries in college football, amped up by 10. That would be one of the biggest games in college football history. And then Washington and Penn State, the 2 outsiders fighting for their spot. That would be great to see. Moving on, Clemson USC, I think would be fun. I think that'd be amazing. Oklahoma Auburn, I would love to see that. Georgia Wisconsin, again, two powerhouse, very, very similar teams. Then Bama Ohio State, Urban Meyer versus Nick Saban is always a fun and interesting matchup. Again, I would love to see that. Now into the next year, last year, Bama and UCF, again, love to see it. Clemson, Michigan, I would like to see that too. Notre Dame and Ohio State, two primary teams in college football history. Oklahoma, Georgia, again, the rematch from the previous year, again, take my money. I want to see that. It's just more games, and what college football fan wouldn't want to see more games? But I'm going to take a break here and kind of regather my thoughts and then come back and try to make a case for the 14 playoff. So I took kind of a 10-minute break to kind of regather my thoughts, and because I want to make a case for a 14 playoff too, because you cannot completely come to an assumption and a conclusion without seeing all sides of it. I think between 4 and 8 is probably the best what you can have for a playoff team bracket. So that's why I'm diving in deep to the 18 playoff and the 14 playoff. Now I made pros for the 18 playoff. Now I'm gonna make pros for the 14 playoff. So the 14 playoff was an improvement from the 2-team playoff. Do not get me wrong, but here's the argument that I would put up for a 14 playoff instead of an 18 playoff. The national champion stays the same every year. Yeah, sure, it's more games, but don't you think we get enough of that the entire year? The more games, the less the games matter. I mean, if there's a 64 team tournament against a 2-team tournament, which game matters more, you think? The 2-team tournament or the 4-team tournament? Less games, or the less quantity means more not only quality, but importance and desire for it. There will be a bigger build-up. It just makes everything bigger. It makes your spot in the Final Four bigger. It makes the games bigger. Everything is bigger, and bigger is better whenever you're talking about football. So I think that a 14 playoff really has that running for him because everything has less of it, which means it's bigger. It's more of it almost. Less means more almost. Less quantity means more quality and desire for it. And also for the 18 playoff, most of the time the committee gets one game wrong, one team wrong. But do you really want to see, do you want to see Clemson squash Notre Dame? Do you want to see Bama squash Michigan State, Oregon squash Mississippi State, Bama squash Wisconsin, Ohio State squash Michigan? Do you want to see Bama destroying UCF and ruining all the talk about UCF? Not knowing almost makes it more fun. Do you want to see Clemson dominate Michigan in this past year? Michigan got crushed by Florida. They don't deserve to be in the playoffs. It won't fix anything. The same argument will still be there. Once we switch to an 18 playoff, it goes to a 16-team playoff. Then it goes to a 32. Then it goes to a 64. Then it goes to a 1,000. It doesn't stop. 4 is perfect because it has quantity, but not too much of it. If you have an 18 playoff, the games don't matter as much. So it's just kind of a slippery slope with that, because as a football fan, you obviously want more games. And as, CBS and Fox and Channel 2, whatever that is, ABC, and ESPN, you always want more games because more games equals more money. But it's devaluing it. In the long run, it will not work out as good in the short run, because in the long run, we'll end up with a 64-team playoff and not being able to control it. Once we give in to the fans wanting more games and expand to an 18 playoff, everything's ruined. We let everything else have the power, and the fans have such a herd mentality, and they crave a lot. Like, this comes from me as a fan. I crave an 18 playoff. I crave a 16-team playoff. I crave more games because more games equals more fun. I love college football. The more games, the better. Like, I want college football to switch to a 16-game schedule because I want more games. Not because it makes sense financially, not because of that, just because I want more games. I don't care about the financial side of it. I want to see the games, whether I'm there or on TV. You know, but it's devaluing it. I mean, you ask me what's bigger, Bama versus Oklahoma this year or Bama versus UCF? Bama versus UCF is more intriguing. It's interesting, but is it big? Whenever we look back on it, whenever Bama beats UCF, are they going to really think it's a huge win? Are they going to be able to have a big stadium, have that in AT&T Stadium, have it sell out, have it be months of talking, or is it just going to be another game? Is it just going to be another game with a little bit more importance than the usual game? Will it devalue it? Because 4 at right now is working. Yeah, there's arguments, but it's working. It's suitable. And as we switch to 8 and we give in, it might not work in the long run. It's the fear of it possibly not working in the long run. Because it'll devalue everything. It'll devalue the spot. It'll devalue the teams. It'll devalue the game. It'll devalue the playoff. If you're talking from a football fan, obviously you would want a 64-team playoff. I mean, you got games every week. And some people say, well, look at the basketball. Basketball works. Basketball is different. Basketball isn't 3 hours. It's not as physically challenging. I mean, every playoff does what they want. Baseball is unique. Football is unique. Every sport has their own unique playoff. I mean, college football and NFL are very, very different in their playoff bracket. I do believe that there are 12 teams in the NFL bracket. Way different than 4 or 8. But it doesn't work for college football. I mean, yeah, that's great that you have a 64-game playoff in basketball, but that wouldn't work in college. College, it would implode. They wouldn't be able to keep up with it. It would devalue everything. Again, the main point for a 14 playoff, the pro for a 14 playoff, and the con for an 18 playoff is whenever you have a 14 playoff, all the value rises. The team value rises. Everything rises except for quantity, which leads into more quality. But whenever you have 8, everything sinks except for quantity. And we get enough quantity every year. I mean, there's a game on Thursday, there's a game on Friday, there's a game on Saturday, there's a game on Sunday. We get enough quantity every year. But it's quality. The playoff is time for quality. I mean, who cares about Alabama versus Tulsa or Alabama versus Pee Wee High School? Nobody cares. And that's eventually what this will turn into. If it starts at 8, 8's cool, but then it'll go to 16 because we want more. Then it'll go to 32 because we want more. Then it'll go to 64 because we want more. It started off as 2. We wanted more. We got 4. We're at 4. We want more. We'll probably end up at 8. We got 8. I'm assuming we'll want more. We'll end up at 16. We have 16. It will work at that point. If we want more, we'll head to 32. We'll have 32. We want more. Heads to 64. And then at that point, you have 6-6 teams like Tennessee this year getting into the playoffs and losing 60-3 against Alabama. It turns in the quality declines so much by the more games you have. It turns into just another week of football. Instead of a month build, huge, important, game-breaking. It'll go down in history But if we switch to an 8-team playoff, it'll eventually go to a 16 playoff. I don't think an 8-team playoff is that bad. But it is switching and giving in, going to an 18 playoff, because it'll always keep on rising if we give in. And again, I'm not really showing my full opinion. I'm almost like writing a paper. It's almost like in school whenever they tell you to write an argumentative paper for both sides. That's kind of what I'm doing here. And then I'll relay my real opinion at the end of the video. So I'm kind of reaching the end here, my 4-team opinion for the playoff. I just think the less quantity, the more quality. That's my case. So back to my real opinion. Let's get to my real opinion. If you're asking me, what do I think's the best decision? I think 8-team. There is a worry that if we switch to 8-team, we'll switch to 16, then we'll switch to 32, then we'll go to 64. I think 8-team is perfect. Honestly, in a perfect world, we jump from 2 to 8, and that's it. But we're going by small increments, and then we'll end up with a lot of quantity but no quality, and that's my worry. But I think an 8-team playoff is perfect. If we stay at 8 teams, I think it'll be perfect because you have enough quality and enough quantity to please everybody as much as you possibly can. And of course, you can't please everybody. That's impossible to please everybody. But you please everybody as much as you possibly can. And I think ultimately, that's the goal. That is the ultimate goal whenever you're a TV channel, whenever you're fans, just everybody wants to please each other. And I think an 8-team playoff is the best way to do that. It's never going to be perfect. You're never going to have a perfect system. There's always going to be arguments whenever you have an 8-team playoff. Oh, what about the number 9, number 10? And for a 2-team playoff, what about 3 and 4? For a 14 playoff, what about 5 and 6? For 16, what about 8? And what about 17 to 20 whenever you have a 64 team? What about 67 through 75? Just there's so much arguments. There always will be arguments. I think we need to get an 8-team playoff and treasure what we have. And I think that's just important, to treasure what we have. Instead of complaining, enjoy it. Because 4 is way better than 2. Nobody can argue that 2 is better. Because you look at this now. Let's go through. Let's go through the 4-team playoffs. Let's start at the beginning. I think the only time where it wasn't really competitive was the first year. That was when Ohio State beat Bama convincingly, then Oregon blew out Florida State, then Ohio State blew out Oregon. That first year wasn't competitive. But then in the second year, Clemson and Oklahoma put on a great game. Bama and Michigan State wasn't very competitive, but Clemson and Bama was so competitive. Then it was Bama and Washington. That was kind of competitive. It wasn't super competitive, but it was still competitive. Clemson and Ohio State was a beatdown, but then again, Bama-Clemson, super competitive. It gets the best of both worlds. It's all about building up to the title. In a tournament, it's all about the finals. It's always who's going to make it to the finals, not who's going to make it to the semis. If you make it to the semis, you're not getting a trophy. It's all about picking out the best teams for the finals, and it's taking, instead of just having a committee say, we think these 2 teams are the best, you need to experiment. You need to collect data and decide who's the best. And I think an 18 playoff is the perfect way to do that, because the top 2, whoever they may be, will have to go through many challenges and many great teams to prove that they are the 2 best. I think over the last 2 years, the playoff has been very, very good. Bama-Oklahoma was competitive. Especially in 2017, that was the best. Clemson-Bama was somewhat competitive. Oklahoma-Georgia was extremely competitive. And then Bama-Georgia, extremely competitive. It's all about picking out the 2 best teams for your title game. The playoff is not a championship game. It's building up to the championship game. It is picking the 2 best teams by experiment, by having them prove. I could say that Florida and Georgia are the 2 best teams in the National College Football League. I'm choking here. But I could say that Florida and Arkansas. I can say that Vanderbilt and Arkansas are the 2 best. That doesn't mean anything. I will not be proven wrong until I put them to the test. The only way to prove me wrong, saying, no, and Arkansas and Vanderbilt are not the best, you suck. That's not how you prove somebody wrong. You say, all right, let's put these teams up against the elite, up against Alabama, up against Clemson. And how do you decide who's elite? You put them up against each other. You decide, everything's more clear whenever you have more games. Like this, Clemson crushes Notre Dame. Well, does that mean that Clemson was good or Notre Dame didn't deserve to be there? Does that mean Oklahoma's better than Notre Dame? Or Notre Dame just got put up against a great team in Clemson? It is extremely interesting because college football, there's only so much the committee can do. Look at this. Year 1, the 4 seed won. Year 2, the 2 seed won. Year 3, the 2 seed won. Year 4, the 4 seed won. Year 5, the 2 seed won. The 1 seed has not won yet. But if the committee had it how it used to be, the 1 seed would have almost won every single one. People get proven wrong by experimenting with these games. By having more games, you put these teams through more of a test, and you really find out what you have in these teams. That's why I think the more games, not a ton of games, but the more games is the best. That's why I'm a big believer in the 8-team playoff, because you figure out the 2 best teams. The best team in college football will be figured out in an 8-team playoff, and that's the ultimate goal. So I hope you guys enjoyed the first Fanatics Deep Dive Discussion, Episode 1. I certainly did enjoy it. It's a lot of work, but it's fun. If you guys enjoy it, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you guys have any way to critique me and make it more just entertaining, please comment down below ways that I can improve. I'm always open for improvement. But have an amazing day. Peace, and give your feedback not only on the video, but what you think the right playoff system should be down in the comments below. Have an amazing day. Peace. Fanatic is out.